Here's a set of pens. You can buy them in different sizes and different sets. A simple little set is just fine. This one goes from 0.005, 0.01, 0.03, and 0.07. You can see they start small and they get larger in size. My favorite pen are these Sharpie fine point pens. You can get them at Staples in a set of 4. They're inexpensive, they don't bleed through the paper, and they have a really nice tip. In case you aren't aware, while using Vellum, you can also use this imbibed eraser if you use the Conor pens. It will actually erase the pen from the vellum paper, but you have to get the same species. There are lots of types of vellums that you can buy. The one that I like to use is basically a multimedia vellum. It's translucent, it has a matte finish, and it's waterproof. I tend to get the 11 by 14 in size, and I simply just cut the pieces of paper in half. Vellum it feels like a piece of plastic. You can see through it, however, it's not 100% clear. So for example, I have an old pen and ink drawing that I have underneath. I lay it on top, which is great because you can do a sketch or a drawing or work from your photograph, and you can basically trace over it. It's very important to maintain copyright laws and only trace over original pieces of work that it belongs to you. So I've cut this piece of vellum down to save it. I'm also going to tape the edges so it doesn't move on me. And I can actually pick it up and look underneath so I can actually check my drawing as well. So for example, one way of drawing is just using a plain old pen, and you can just go into this and sketch as need be. I'm just kind of doing some loose drawing here. You'll notice that some of the lines, to make a more elegant drawing, you want to vary the weight of your line, making them thick and thin to give them volume. In some of my drawings, I did what's called stippling, and stippling is basically giving your drawing weight and value by doing little tiny dots. So for example, if I needed little shadows, I can stipple, which is basically you just go up and down until you get that shadow line going in there, and that's called stippling. It's great because you can really do a nice gradation. It does take a long time, and if you're going to do stippling, I recommend using the different size pen nibs so that you can get different weights in there. So you can kind of see just a very slight change there. This is part of a series I did for the New England Aquarium. The dive club wanted t-shirts done, and they were looking for specific fish species. So here's a grouper. And you can actually see the dot size variation of larger dots here compared to over here. So that's using the different size pens. And so this fish had lots of different variations. You get the sense of dark and light. There's shadows. There's solid lines. There's a sense of three-dimensional, like this is coming towards you and this is going away from you, simply by using light and dark. Here's a great example of stippling. You can see that along the edges of his nose, it's not a solid line, it's broken up to give the sense of fur. You get the feeling of the bone structure underneath his skin, the shagginess of the mane, and again, this is with stippling with pens. You can even see the musculature within his forelegs here, all the way down to his hooves. Another technique is using drafting film ink and a paintbrush. And you can get some beautiful variations in line. This is one of my favorite techniques to use. Be aware that this is waterproof and it will stain your clothing and your fingers. So just be careful with it. This is just a Higgins. You can get this at any craft store pretty much. It's just a waterproof black ink. I've placed some ink in a cup, not that much, and I'm basically going to dip my brush in there and just kind of get the excess off on the side. Now with this, you can use different amounts of pressure to give a weighted line. So for example, I can come around here. I want a little bit more shadow, so I'm pushing down, and you can see that I'm widening out on the paintbrush. So I'm really giving a sense of depth. It gives it a really nice feeling. When using a brush, you can vary your line strength. So for example, you can start out very light, and then you can go heavy, and you can go light again. There's times when you want more shadow, and you'll just push the brush down. There's times that you can do really, really fine work. And again, you can get some really neat lines with it. So this is kind of something fun to play with and experiment with. Here is another example of using ink with a brush on vellum. You can see that the muscle striations have volume with them and depth. They also have a weighted feel to them along the contours of the skin. The other thing I wanted to show you is at the edges of these lines. You see how they're dashed at the end? Because they do actually continue on. And that's a great way to continue a drawing, is that you just kind of break that line up a little bit, and it gives it the feeling of continuation. Here's a great example of using the brush. You can see the variation in weight of the line of the jawline here. You can see that it just gives it so much more presence and power. You can see that the heavier line, you can see that it's really pushing down there. So this was part of a surgical series of doing an emergency tracheotomy. So again, you're putting heavier weights on the bottom of things to give them some volume. The beauty of pen and ink is that you can use it as the base for something else. So for example, this was photocopied onto pastel paper and was filled in with gouache. You can also sometimes photocopy onto lightweight watercolor paper and do watercolors as well. Pen and inks are really the bread and butter of any illustrator.